My name is David Ditch. I'm the director here. And tonight's program, of course, is hog finishing and processing. And our speaker is Dr. Greg Renfro. He's an extension meat specialist at the University of Kentucky in the Department of Animal and Food Sciences. So we're really fortunate to have Greg down here. He's a very busy man. He was telling me his travel schedule, and he's going to be all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast, and he teaches 2 days a week, but he made time for us. So Greg's got a reputation for putting on a really good program. I know he's going to be excited to hear your all's questions. So in just a second, I'll turn it over to him. One other thing I want to mention to you is you came in, did you get an opportunity to pick up a flyer advertising our Taste of the Mountains Field Day? Okay? If you did, do we have some more? I see some folks without them. That is next Saturday, September the 22nd. It is our big College of Ag biannual field day. And it starts at 10 o'clock. Registration starts at 9. The field day has a number of workshops in goat production, beef, nutrition, wood cutting workshop, a general hort tour if you're interested in high tunnel construction. You know, we've got something for everybody in all ages. So please put that on your calendar and join us next Saturday, the 22nd. Okay? Gentleman up front asked me where the name for this community, Quicksand, came from. And I'll tell you the real quick, the little folklore. Back around in the 1920s, there was a church group conducting a service on the banks of the North Fork Kentucky River, which you crossed when you came into Quicksand. They noticed a gentleman on the opposite side on horseback looking for a safe place to cross. And he looked around, he thought he picked the right spot, and as he crossed the North Fork Kentucky River, he sank out of sight. And they assumed that he was lost in quicksand. So that's how, that's the story goes, that's how this community got its name, Quicksand.
You're sticking to it.
And I'm sticking to it, right, yeah. I'm not going to ride across the river on horseback. I believe there's quicksand out there. All right, Greg, I'm going to turn it over to you. It's all yours.
You bet. It's good to be here this evening. I always enjoy coming down to the southeastern part of the state. And I was visiting with some of the folks, and I was telling them I've been at UK for about 7 years now, and as you can tell, I get reminded of this all the time when I come down here. I sound funny. I didn't know I had an accent until I moved to Kentucky, and I'm originally from Illinois. What's ironic is my aunt has gotten into this genealogy thing, you know, and she's traced my grandmother and my grandfather's side straight to Garrett County. And for generations, they were the first ones to leave Garrett County. And then my father says, you know, well, that's funny because I found out that we actually came up through, the family came from Scotland up through Harlan County, Bell County, and escaped to Illinois to get away from the coal mine. So I don't know, maybe I was sent back here to balance things out over the years. But as David said, this is going to be a fun one, a fun kind of cutting demonstration, and I go off to this weekend. I go to Cooperstown, New York, to do a cutting demonstration in Cooperstown. Does anybody know what Cooperstown's famous for?
Baseball.
Baseball Hall of Fame. Yeah, as soon as I'm done, I'm slipping off. I'm going straight there as a diehard St. Louis Cardinal fan. And then next week is going to be a really fun one. I often describe myself as a Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin type conservative. I am flying off to San Francisco for a week, so I don't know what's going to happen out there. I'm teaching hippies and hipsters how to cut meat, so pray for me if you would. Because I could say that here and probably get shot out there. But at any rate, I'm going to let you guys kind of dictate how things and what you want to know, how things should go and what you want to know. I've got a carcass with me, and as you can see, it looks a little ominous, and I've been sharing with some folks. I talked to one of the boys in the meat lab into helping me take it out to the car, and we wrapped it in plastic, and off about 100 yards away from us as we were taking this thing out wrapped in plastic, there was a UK police officer there. He was kind of wooing one of the nurses walking in the hospital. He was really looking at us pretty hard. You see this kind of long black bag here carried out with string around it. But he didn't stop us, so she must have really had his attention there. But David asked me to talk to you about the whole process of hogs and from beginning to end. How many of you do this at home? Few of you do. How many of you are thinking about doing things like this? That's what I kind of thought, yeah. This isn't too bad. At UK, we have a meat slab. We are a fully functional meat processing facility. We're a USDA inspected facility. And when we look at the actual carcass, I'll point some things out from the USDA. But by law, since we are a USDA facility, when we harvest pigs, I've got harvest in parentheses there. You guys know about political correctness, right? You're not a garbage man, you're a sanitation engineer. One of those things. Well, it's hit us in the meats industry. They've decided that the word slaughter is too harsh, so we now use the word harvest. Okay? And being the smart aleck that I can be at times, I usually say, we're going to send them to the light. That sounds a little bit more than that. And there's some other parts of that whole political correctness that comes into play we're going to talk about more this evening. Now, as you can see, at UK, since we're a facility, we can use the gunshot method to put animals down. Now, by law, okay, animals must be rendered, this is how it actually reads in the CFR, the Code of the Federal Register. Animals must be rendered insensible to pain before exsanguination, which is government ease for they must be stunned before the bled. Why they couldn't say that, I don't know. Okay, but nonetheless, there's two exemptions, or one exemption for two different religions. That's the ritual slaughter for the kosher slaughter for the Jewish faith and the halal slaughter for the Muslim faith. But obviously, if you know much about the Jewish faith and the Muslim faith, we really don't get into that with pigs. So pigs have to be, by law, from the USDA to be USDA inspected product. They have to be stunned. Now, we use electricity at UK. You can use the gunshot method, and it works really well if used correctly. The reason why we don't use gunshot method at UK is we are on a college campus. Okay, and we are within Lexington, so a gun going off, you would still be answering questions. So now, the USDA has gotten so strict with this whole humane handling and humane slaughter. This is what we practice, humane slaughter. That's the whole exsanguination or stun before bleeding thing. It's gotten down to the old sniper mentality of one shot, one kill. All right? And I'll tell you some stories about stunning pigs. They've got this nice illustration there. You can see if you go, if you draw a line right across the top of their eyes and you go up about an inch or 2 inches above that line, right in the middle of the skull, should hit the brain and they should go down immediately. Okay? This works really well if you got a higher caliber 22. Okay? A 22 long or something along those lines. Now, this method works perfect for a pig up to around 325 pounds. It works well. I ran into a situation when I was in grad school at Mizzou where this method did not work very well. Okay, and there was some research coming out of nationally that said that there were some concerns with the fertility of men in Columbia, Missouri. And they were blaming it on pesticide residues and so on and so forth in groundwater. And so one of our vet researchers got this idea, well, we're going to feed a bunch of pesticides to boars, and we'll take semen samples and testicular weights and things like that. Well, the semen sample is pretty easy to do on a live animal. The testicular weights, we have to kind of send them to the light, if you will. And he called me up and asked me if I'd help out with the research, and I was more than happy to when I was in grad school there. And I think he meant to tell me that the smallest one was 300 pounds. In reality, he said the biggest one was 300 pounds. Because the first one walked in about 325, and we use a captive bolt gun instead of a gunshot. And pig went down fine. The next one walked in at about 650. And I hit him with the bolt right where I'm supposed to, and he went to the ground, and guy went to shackle him, and as soon as he grabbed that hind leg, that pig stood up. And this is a boar, fully intact. The good thing is the tusks were cut, because he wasn't real happy, okay? And the guy doing the shack said, "You missed him." I said, "No, I didn't. Line him up again, I'll hit him again." This time I just made him madder, all right? And we realized that the head, the skull cap, was very, very thick, and that gun that bolt gun didn't have enough to shove that bolt all the way through there. So we called out to the beef farm. Guy brings in a 30-30. He shoots that thing right between the eyes. Now, bear in mind, we're inside a concrete building. That wasn't a very smart thing to do for two reasons. Good thing he hit, because if he missed, it would have been real exciting. The other thing was a 30-30 going off inside a concrete room. It was quite loud there. Right between the eyes, perfect shot, just pissed him off even more. We discovered that when they get above about 400 pounds, you have to come and hit them from behind the head. So for some reason, you get in a situation where you have a bigger pig that's into that 350 and above, you've got to come in and shoot them behind the head. There's that soft spot. You have a soft spot here that you kind of aim for. And you hit that, they go down immediately. We learned that the hard way. And what happened was, we got curious, we took that big boar, took his head, skinned the head out, and what happened was the sinus cavity is so deep and so vast in those big pigs that when that bullet hit there, it expelled all its energy going through the first part of the bone, and then just didn't have enough to get through the sinus cavity to get to the brain. You could actually take the head and rattle, and you could hear the bullets rattle around inside there. So be careful when you've got a bigger pig that you're trying to stun with the gunshot. Even if you have a captive bolt, remember that. We get above 350, we're going to have to go in from behind. Ask the buffalo people that. That's how they have to put buffaloes down. Is they have to stand over top of them, and they run them between, they stand up on a stanchion, they run them between their legs, and they shoot them at the back of the head. So that's what you got to do to stun these animals when they get that big. Now, once you get him down and you shackle him, and at home slaughter, folks, very innovative. I've heard of folks having a front loader on a tractor, and that's how they get him up in the air. I've heard of others having a come along on a tree or inside a barn or something along those lines. The ingenuity of country folks and farmers often amaze me, that their engineering ability. And so I'm sure those of you that have done this before, you have your own method and so on. But once you get him up in the air, some of you go just straight ear to ear, and there's nothing wrong with that. The challenge we have in the industry of going ear to ear kind of takes away those jowls. All right. We in the industry, you can see, it's kind of hard to know if you can tell in the picture or not. You see the base of that sternum there. We're going to go in right underneath that sternum with our knife, and you only need about a 6-inch blade to do this. Go right underneath that sternum, flip your knife forward, pull that out, so you're only going to have a hole, about a slit about like that. What you end up doing is severing the major veins and arteries coming out of that heart, and boom, they bleed out in no time flat. Yeah. They'll bleed out, I would say 98% of the blood's gone in about 30 seconds when you do that. You can get really good if you get the knife deep enough, you can actually cut the top of the heart open, and that really, they bleed out a lot faster. Now, this is the thing that freaks out my students. Okay, you got to realize, tomorrow I'm going to walk into my classroom, and I've got 38 students in my classroom. 6 of those are boys. The rest are girls. Now, last year I had 2 cheerleaders and a volleyball player. Real easy to tell. The volleyball player was about 6'5", and the cheerleaders were about 4'5". Okay? So, and most of these individuals are not from a rural background. And so what happens next, you have to explain to these students what they're going to see. Once we've got them stunned, we've got them bled, or they're in the process of bleeding, it takes about another 10 to 15 minutes for those nerves to die off. And so it's not uncommon to see legs move and feet kick, and we get some of them that just, pigs especially, we call them dancers, they just start kicking their legs and they spin. No big deal to us, it just makes a heck of a mess. You know, cattle do something curious, and I guarantee you this will happen if we have a new group of individuals who have never seen any type of animal slaughter before. Cattle will do this every single time. We'll have this big 1,200-1,400 pound beast hanging from the ceiling, and we've already made the cut and he's bled out and we're just waiting for the nerves to die off. And I'll look up every time. It's almost like death in taxes. It's going to happen if we got a new group of people in there. I've never seen this before. I'll see the chest walls relax, which tells me that the last gasp of breath is leaving the lungs, and it passes over the vocal cord and you hear it. And they all start screaming. He's not dead. I guarantee you, folks, you lose 8 gallons of blood in 30 seconds, you're dead, okay? But it's all just part of this nerve twitching thing that we've got going on. We're waiting for those nerves to die off. But you've got to tell kids this kind of stuff nowadays. Otherwise, they leave there with that horrified look on their face like a lot of us did when we saw our first horror movie when we were kids. So bleeding, like I said, if you do it right, can be done in about 30 to 45 seconds. But we still got to wait for that. We still got to wait for things to, the nerves to die off. Now, if those of you who've done this before, how many of you fill a big horse trough full of water and heat it up? A few of you. Yeah. The ideal temperature for that trough, that water in there, is 140. Now, if you're like me and you forgot your handsaw, if you get out there and you heat your trough full of water, the best way, if you don't have a thermometer, is to swipe your finger across there, and once you get to the third swipe, if you start to feel that kind of pain in your finger, you're right at about 140 degrees. That's perfect. Okay? Now, if you keep doing that and you don't feel any pain, okay, throw another log on the fire. All right? Because you got to get that temperature up there. Now, if you do that on the first swipe, you're above 140. Now, this isn't like a lot of things in life that we've understood. You know, like when I grew up in Illinois, my grandfather was one of the first people to realize, well, that big jar of whatever says a pound per acre, and it works pretty well. I bet if I put 2 pounds per acre on there, it's going to work really well. Okay? This isn't one of those situations where the hotter is better, because what can end up happening is if you get the temperature too hot, okay, there's this little connective tissue called collagen that holds in the hair follicle. If you get it too hot, what's going to end up happening is that connective tissue, that collagen, is going to harden, and you're just going to have to shave those pigs. They won't be hair very well. So if you swipe it once or twice and you're already feeling that pain, let it cool off until we get to that third swipe. We get about 140. Now, some of you are thinking, well, we just take the hide off. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just remember when you're taking the hide off, not to let that hide flap back on there, especially the outside of the animal getting on the inside of the animal, because then we've got some contamination issues there. Questions so far? No? Must be doing a really good job, Paul, of explaining this, right? You've done this before. So, like I said, there's a little bit more science to it than what you think. Next thing you're going to do is remove the internal organs. Now, 2 weeks ago, I was up in Pendleton County, and we were doing a deer workshop up there. And I had the game warden there. And the game warden and I, at least we were on the same page. Because we asked somebody, okay, when you go to eviscerate that deer carcass, what do you do? And he says, well, this one little redneck boy, he stands up and he said, we just get our pocket knife out like that, and you just shove it straight in there and go straight down. What have you done?
Punctured a bunch of internal
You
stuff.
bet. And you're going to, if you get some of that fluid on you, you're going to smell really funky for about 3 weeks. Okay? We do a couple different methods. I'm going to grab one of my knives over here so you can actually. We don't use pocket knives, by the way. Okay? hopefully everybody knows about knives, right? It's better to cut with what type of knife? A sharp one, right?
Yeah,
Because you're more likely to cut yourself with a
dull.
dull knife, right?
Right,
But if you cut yourself with a sharp knife, guess what it's going to do?
cut more.
Heck of a lot more damage, all right? So a dull knife may get you 6 stitches. You cut yourself with a sharp knife, you're talking about 8 or 9. So that's what people think, well, if I got a sharp knife, I really don't have to be that careful. You still do. You still do. Now, what we like to do is, because we're USDA, the last thing we want to do is puncture those internal organs, all right? Because then the digestive spews out, and we have to go in there and trim all that digestive off of the carcass. So what a lot of us will do, so we have this big carcass sitting right here. If you're right-handed, I like to grab my knife just like this. And I like to do exactly what you see here. And I'm going to start a cut right up there at the top where the crotch is. And I'm going to make sure that I've got all the internal organs out of the way. Put my knife in like this and just go straight down. And the reason why I have my fingers like this, because if I do come across any internal organs, my fingers are going to push them out of the way and I go straight down like that. That's the best way to do it. Now, when we do this in class, I tell kids, once you start, don't stop. Okay? Don't pull your knife out and go to look at it, because then everything comes spewing out on top, and then we have a little bit more challenge. Now, some folks, well, that kind of sounds creepy to stick your hand inside there. Then you could do the thing where you put your 2 fingers in there and you kind of do this, kind of tease it all the way down. Okay? You can do that, whatever you're comfortable with. All right? Whatever you're comfortable with. It's no big deal. But the main thing to do is not puncture any of those internal organs. All right? Now, some folks like to keep the liver. Some folks don't. Since you're not doing this, if you're doing this at a home slaughter, you're not USD, you can't legally sell this stuff, but you still can look at the liver, because that liver is going to tell you a lot about the health of that animal. For example, if you open up that liver, or you open up that carcass, you take that liver out, and there's a bunch of white specks on top of there, okay, you might want to call the vet to have him look, because you might have something wrong. Remember, that liver is kind of the filter of the body. If you open up that carcass and you take that liver out and it's got just boils all over it, don't take the chances. Just throw the whole entire carcass away, because something's got in there, usually some sort of parasite. All right? You can tell a lot about the health of those animals. Okay? Now, sometimes you can get those white spots on there, and it just goes back to what the animal was fed. But there's other times those white spots can indicate either flukes or infections or things like that. And if you see if you see 1 or 2, 3 or 4, don't worry about it. If you see a bunch of them, then you might want to call the local vet and say, hey, you know, is this safe? And 9 times out of 10, he's probably going to say, well, what you been feeding him? Okay, yeah, that might be something you fed. Okay, might be something you fed. All right. If you see any, the inspector always looks at lymph glands. All right, and he's looking for the nice kind of brownish to dark brown lymph gland. If he sees a jet black swollen lymph gland, he knows there's some sort of infection in that body. Okay, so just some things to keep in mind as you're going through there, because obviously you don't want something unhealthy or unsafe to enter into even your family. Now, like I said, you legally cannot sell that, but you're still feeding your family, and nobody wishes harm on their family. Now, once you got the internal organs out, you got the heart and lungs out, the trachea, kidneys, and so on, you can reach in there, and I'll show you on our carcass over here, take the leaf fat out. It helps the carcass cool down quicker. Some people will keep that leaf fat and cook it down for leaf lard. Okay, I don't know if anybody still cooks with lard anymore, but you know, it's still something that is you can use that particular leaf fat for. You know, lard makes the best biscuits and pie crust and things like that. And I imagine now, if you actually fed your kids lard, state would come take them away, but you know. But nonetheless, a lot of people still do that. You can split the carcass in half, and when we get this guy over here in a second, we'll get you guys to kind of gather around the table. You can split him in half, and I'd like to tell you I did this intentionally, but I actually left my handsaw set. I know right where it's at in the lab. I sat right there, thought, I don't want to forget that, but you can use a Sawzall, and even the USDA at times, you find the right inspector, they'll let you use a Sawzall as long as this thing hasn't cut up anything else but meat, and as long as the blade is stainless steel as well. They'll let you use a Sawzall, okay? And we use well saws, which are essentially the same thing, it just they're all made out of stainless steel. And so you can use one of these to split the carcass in half if you would like. Others, that seems like too much work, and it is a lot of work. Even if you got a handsaw to do that, it's a lot of work to cut those guys up or split that backbone in half. And then the thing that always bugs me about deer hunters, and I know there's probably deer hunters in the room, but you know, from a food safety standpoint, what always bothers me about deer hunters is if you shoot a deer on a day like today, and you gut him, you field dress him, do everything as safe as possible, then you go out there and you hang him in the tree in the front yard so everybody can see him. Okay? We're still getting up into the 70s on days like today. We like to keep things below 45. All right? And that's what gets me. They hang that thing up in the tree so everybody driving by can see you got a deer. All the wild neighbor dog is chewing on it, and leaves and sticks are falling in, birds landing on it. By God, I got a deer, and everybody in the county is going to see this. All right? Believe me, I come from Illinois. I see the same thing all the time. You know, most of us don't think about doing this whole hog killing thing until we get into November, December, when the average temperature is below 45, all right, even in the daytime. So you want to make sure you're below that. And, you know, if you can time it to where you want to use Mother Nature as your cooler, make sure you got a day where throughout the day it's at least below 45, okay? And that keeps any bacteria from growing on there, anything like that. So, questions on that? Now I say, let this guy chill for at least 24 hours. And the reason why I say that, in the industry, all right, even though the average American is going to eat somewhere around 200 pounds of meat this year, about 80 pounds of that total is going to be chicken, about 60 pounds of that total is going to be beef, and about 45 pounds of that total is going to be pork. So even though from an animal protein standpoint, pork is somewhere around number 3 on the list, all right? We still, worldwide, eat more pork than anybody else. And so our slaughter rates for pork are around 1,300 pigs an hour, cranking out 16 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week. So they're really cranking things out of there. Now, even though we may not eat that much pork in the U.S., we're shipping a lot of that over to Europe, a lot of that over the Pacific Rim. And so I say 24 hours because that's what they do in the industry. As soon as they reach a temperature below 45, they're coming out of the coolers and being cut up and put in vacuum bags and going out to wherever. Questions? Anybody tired of sitting there? Yeah. Let's gather around my friend over here and we'll talk about him.